I am the version of you who almost married your first love. I mean, let's just take a moment to process that.
Giving someone an opportunity to encounter and to be with a part of themselves that embodies a choice they did not make can transform someone's understanding of themselves and their lives. No IFS work, in my opinion, is surface level. We're getting to the crux of what it means to be human and to be alive, to hold that soul inside this material body. And so when we're allowed to be with someone in that deep of a space, it's holy. We are the universe looking back at itself in some ways. We are the universe reflecting back on itself. Who has my attention now? And who is leading me now? And what am I consenting to? And what is asking for my attention?
Rev. Dr. Celeste Lebak is a minister, writer, and founder of the Inner Sanctuary Institute, where she trains clergy and spiritual leaders in internal family systems informed approaches to spiritual formation and pastoral care. An IFS Level 3 certified practitioner and Universalist Christian mystic, her work explores the intersection of psychology, spirituality, neurodivergence, and contemplative practice. Drawing from internal family systems, restorative justice, psychedelic-assisted therapy training, Celeste is interested in how compassionate attention transforms individuals and communities. She writes and teaches on self-leadership, liberation, and the sacred dimensions of our inner lives. In this conversation, Celeste will explore the transpersonal dimensions of IFS, including spiritual experiences, guides, and other phenomena that challenge conventional understandings of healing and consciousness. Her work invites us to approach both our humanity and our spirituality with greater curiosity, humility, and compassion. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Welcome to Your Soul's Therapist podcast, Celeste. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation and coming here to talk about your body of work and, in my opinion, really groundbreaking new perspectives that you're bringing into the field of spirituality, consciousness, internal family systems therapy. It's fascinating, and I'm really, really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Vlada. I'm really humbled to be invited and very grateful that you're interested in the work that I'm doing. So thank you so much for that.
I spent some time exploring your body of work, and it's honestly quite extensive. So it took me a minute to define exactly the route for us to take. And as I'm coming more from the background of spirituality and everything that is subtle, maybe unseen, that I love and to explore and that I work with in my practice, I defaulted to choosing the transpersonal parts that you bring to the table. And you sent to me this fabulous PDF of 13 pages about all these different types of parts that you have so beautifully structured that I have never heard and seen anyone doing this before. So please let me know first, how did you come up with this protocol, if I may call that, or structure of transpersonal parts? What's your experience with this so far?
Yeah, my answer, Vlada, is actually fairly similar to Dick's. I started just tracking what was happening in my office. So I don't know why this is the case, but I seem to attract folks who maybe it's because I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister, and that creates a level of safety in my office for spiritual conversations. Maybe it's my presence and my openness to be able to receive whatever happens in my office. But it really all came from my clients. So every example that you see, both in the white paper and in the protocol, which I'm happy to share with your audience, by the way, I'm happy to share both of those things. So these are two papers that were created and actually distributed at the IFSI Global Conference last fall. So myself and Margaret Conley actually presented on my work at that space. But all of these examples of transpersonal parts, whether or not we're looking at multiverse parts or guides or alternate possibility selves or past life parts or future life parts. All of those parts showed up because the clients that I had defined them in a way that distinguished their own system and parts that belonged to their own biographical story from these parts, which is why I had to start paying attention to them. So I would end up asking questions when these parts would say that they were not actually part of the client. I had to go on a little bit of a search about, well, what does that actually mean? And how are we meeting them in the space? I also happen to be trained in psychedelic assisted therapy. And so I have an open stance, a very open stance to whatever the client is experiencing in the moment. So I know, for example, that set and setting prior to a session of IFS, just like prior to a session with psychedelics, impacts how our system uses the context in order to be able to talk about what's going on psychologically and psychically inside the client as I experience it. And so being able to know that if you, for example, love to watch ghost hunter television shows and are in that space for a week before you come sit in my office, you may encounter something different than someone who does not watch those kinds of things. So whether or not we believe it or not, my ethical stance is that the practitioner or the guide needs to be someone who can greet whatever happens with an openness and with the language of the client and that the client actually presents.
This is very interesting because it's true that today the more kind of fractals of our being are opening up. And there is still a lot of pushback on that and doubts and questions around legitimacy of what we present in our systems. And at the same time, like in your beautifully structured protocol about transpersonal parts, we start noticing that this is presenting itself, this phenomena, or however we want to call it, presents itself. And probably not many practitioners and therapists today are very well equipped to handle their own system while their client is presenting that, and also knows exactly how to hold space for the client. So just before we go into that, maybe for those people that are either practitioners or, they are in their own therapy, how would you define what is transpersonal parts and what are our own parts? How we can make that definition?
Yeah. So in the work that I've done, the idea is basically focusing on whether or not we are a client or a guide. It's when a part, and we have to follow and assume that all the parts of the client are biographical, are part of the own client's story until kind of proven otherwise. And in the protocol for practitioners, you'll see that. But when we're greeting a part, when we're in relationship with a part, from our self to the client's part, or from accompanying the client's self to be with their part, kind of as more of a cultural liaison, or I call myself a psychonaut in that space where I'm actually going with that client into that space. It's when the parts themselves self-identify as being a version of the client. We ask them directly, are you a part of Vlada? They say no. They just literally say no. And they might claim to exist in another time or another dimension or another reality. They might carry, if it's a guide, maybe distinct stories or existential themes. Sometimes they'll claim to be connected to some other field, like whether or not it's coming from a different time or tradition. Sometimes they present as another version of the client. So those ideas of being multiverse, like they'll say, I am you. And, when I first encountered that, I thought, just for the guides, I thought that was for the practitioners, I thought that was a self-like part in some way. So when I first encountered this, I'm trying to follow the root of a self-like part, but they were insistent that that was not the case. And so they claimed to be the client, merged with the client's identity, but can also claim to be fully separate. So I'm a version of you, I am you, I'm you from a different space and time. Transpersonal parts are parts that don't necessarily have to be burdened. And so there's a time when I sat with a client who said that the part that she was experiencing was a future version of herself on the same timeline. And so it was a part who came back and said how proud she was of the work that she was doing. And I didn't lead her down that. We, as practitioners, it's interesting. We can really lead our clients. So we have to be very careful to really respond to what is happening in the moment with the client and to stay curious and open in that space. And it has just been so fascinating when I can set my parts, when I can lead my own system and set my own questions in some way aside about whether or not it's real or whether or not it fits the script of what is a normal IFS encounter. It kind of opens itself up to a wide variety of possibilities. And so transpersonal parts, in short, are just parts that are not part of the client's biographical story. So I would even include ancestral parts. I would include guides in that construct as well.
This is truly fascinating. And I want to go into those things that really made me take a minute this morning when I was reading
Sure.
this about these parts, because I thought, honestly, in many years of, being psychic and doing clairvoyant readings, I've seen past lives, this things. But actually, reading this, I realized I haven't yet seen it all. My question would be,
I don't think I have either.
maybe there is more. I mean, this is really fascinating. So, how did you feel first time when your client started presenting, for example, the future version of themselves, and that part of them or that transpersonal part started talking to you? How was your system? What did you experience? What was going through your mind and body at that moment? Dear friends, I want to share some really exciting news with you. This November and December, I will be hosting my signature 5-stage spiritual healing journey that I call Soul Revival in Bali. And I want to personally invite those of you who have been with me before on retreats or in one-to-one work, and also those of you who have always wanted to join me but haven't done that yet. I really feel this might be the best moment to do so. Soul Revival is a very deep and very sacred work. We will do energy healing, chakra clearing and awakening, spiritual ceremonies, meditations, and so much more. And it's a journey back to your soul, back to your essence. And so I will be there with you, fully present, guiding you through every step of the way. And this place where this will happen, when Soul Revival takes place, is truly magnificent. It really won my heart. It's a luxury, wellness, and longevity sanctuary in Nusa Dua. Hot and cold plunges, saunas, infrared therapy, everything your body needs to thrive. So while we do the deep work of the soul, your body will be taken care of in the best possible way. With Michelin Guide level holistic cuisine and some of the best spa treatments on the whole island. Healing the soul while nourishing the body. That's what makes this experience so special. I invite you to discover more about the Soul Revival process and everything it entails. And if you feel called to join this experience, you can book a complimentary introduction call with me, so you can ask me your questions directly and see if this is exactly what you are looking for. More details on blissbodyjourneys.com. The link is in the show notes.
Yeah, that's really an interesting question, Vlada. So I have a very porous system, and I have to be very deliberate of setting a container for my own energy when I'm with a client. So I am not only talking to my inner system, but I like to talk about, and actually when I work with training spiritual leaders and clergy around IFS, one of the things I talk about is the Mobius strip. So it's this idea that I am circulating my attention, and where I put my attention is really important. And so I'm circulating my attention on kind of what I would call a Mobius strip cycle. So that is going inside and checking with my own parts and my own system and my own embodied presence, paying attention to the client and what I'm noticing in the client's embodied presence and how their parts are presenting. But I'm also paying attention to this sweet spot that happens in between the two of us in the field. trained in Gestalt, and so I have a big awareness of systemic creation of convergence that can happen between a client and a practitioner. And so in the moment when, for example, that future self part showed up, the first feeling that I had was awe. And I have been trained to really pay attention to awe and reverence. It's funny because I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister, I love awe and aha, right? So there's a dopamine hit for me in some ways in my system with coming to an aha in a moment, but there's also a dopamine hit for me when my system experiences awe. And I would say that probably in all of these circumstances, the feeling that I would pinpoint for me in the moment was awe. Now, for the client, it just depended on who the client was. Sometimes these were very rational clients who have not experienced anything outside of what they would consider to be the material world. And frankly, even talking to them about their inner parts and energies can sometimes be difficult for these clients. And some of the parts that I mentioned in the paper came up in those clients. And so even while I'm experiencing awe, they might be confused, they might be fearful. And so for me to be able to kind of stay in my seat of self while I'm in the space of attending to the parts that come up inside the client is really important. I will say that I had some excitement in that moment too, because I'm always fascinated with new things. I have an ADHD, late diagnosed autism, and I definitely get a little bit of, like I said, a dopamine hit of something new, something novel. And so there's a part of me that has to really check that when I'm guiding a system to be able to make sure that I don't over focus on what is happening in a moment like that. But honestly, it was excitement that I had to curb a little, and then it was reverence inside the context of my body. So for me, I would describe that as a kind of an overall warmth, what feels like the boundaries of my system dissolving a little bit around the edges in a way that feels very, very reverent to me. It feels like I'm part of that thing that we're co-creating together between the two of us, and I'm witnessing something that almost feels to me in my own spiritual life that I've been invited to witness and that I really need to pay attention.
These moments, I had some of them and they feel very sacred. And in my system, sometimes there's a part of me, just a rational part of me is like, is this really
Of course
happening?
Yes.
Even though, my first background is spiritual stuff and energy stuff. And after that was IFS. But still, there is a part of me that is like, oh my God, because for our rational minds, it's just how is it possible for a future self to show up? But I just want to take a moment, if you don't mind, and read out loud to listeners, because they can also, thankfully, with your permission, download the PDF for practitioners, but also for people that interested in self-discovery, because now with all this information, self-discovery is becoming, a more diverse experience. So let's see. Transpersonal parts, multidimensional counterparts. A version of the client existing in another dimension or plane. For example, I am you, but I exist in another reality alongside this one. I think I had glimpses of that myself in the moments where I was really connected and really open and attuned. And I felt like there is something speaking to me from the future. And it felt like it's like intuitively you're picking up on something, but you don't know exactly what it is. But here it is.
Yes. Yeah. I'd love to say just something very quickly about that, if you don't mind. And if this doesn't feel like it fits in with the podcast, we can definitely cut it. But I want to say that for me, I have a very rational background. I have a degree in philosophy. I have a master's in divinity and a doctorate in divinity that focused on IFS, actually. But the thing that fascinates me the most scientifically is time. So I am already really fascinated by time. And actually, the construct of time not only is not being linear, but actually being spiral in the same way that our galaxy moves through the universe. So this idea of time being both linear and spiral at the same time. So if you're watching this on the YouTube, you're going to see my finger move. But the idea is that as we move through the universe, our galaxy is actually going in larger and larger spirals as it continues to move in a direction. And so for me, that's what time feels like in my system. So if I'm looking at my life going forwards, I'm looking at, oh, here's what my life was like from 0 to 10. Here's what it was like from 10 to 20. Here's what it was like from 20 to 30. And we're reflecting back on that in a different way. And it kind of normalizes the way in which we experience the same kinds of situations from a different perspective. But for me, the multiverse and future parts, since time is really just a construct of how our material bodies that are holding an eternal place are experiencing the world, how change happens. So I'm fascinated with that. And I think that it's something to explore. And I love the fact that IFS gave me glimpses of how we experience time in a different way.
Thank you for saying that. It definitely fits the podcast. And I think it just definitely fits whatsoever, because the concept of time is really a unique concept, right? And sometimes we see everything, like almost everything is happening simultaneously, past, present, and the future.
Yes,
And
all at once.
yeah, it's like it's just one thing. And somehow we are moving through this idea of time with a clock as a trajectory, but who invented the clock and who invented that it's now 2026, 2027, 2028.
We could do a whole nother podcast, Vlada, on that, because the reality is that who controls time controls the narrative. And there is such a relationship between the political and the spiritual and the ways in which our lives have been controlled by how clocks function in capitalism and how clocks function in the world. So yes, we could definitely go that direction in another slot.
Yeah, I feel with you, we can go into multiverse of directions and never get bored and keep discovering. So, but I will continue with the different parts. Alternate possibility self and unlived choice. This has just stopped me in my thinking. An unlived choice or divergent life path in this lifetime. I really took a moment to sit with this piece of information and experience of the clients. I am the version of you who almost married your first love.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just take a moment to process that.
Yeah, that actually was a really beautiful session that I had a client who was forced to go to a college that was actually a Christian college.
I just want to pause here for a moment and let you know that if you feel called to go deeper on your healing journey and you need someone safe, someone who can truly support you, I'd love to invite you to explore my signature program, Untangle, or my one-to-one retreats and private healing work. You will find all the details in the show notes or on my website, vladadesouza.com. Don't be shy. You're always welcome to connect with me in person through a complimentary call. And now, back to the episode.
When she would have preferred to have gone to a very liberal academic college. And what was happening is that that version of herself who did not have a choice in that moment actually was living alongside her and had its own persona. So like there was the version of her who was existing in my office at the moment, which went to that college and graduated and went on a trajectory to go into a profession based on that experience. And she said, I can see her. When we got into the part, she said, I can see her. She's me, but she's radical. And she's talking back to me in a way that I feel like I would have been if I had experienced that liberal college education that I did not have access to. And honestly, the reason why I included that is because she was able to not only talk to that part, and we had a reconciliation conversation essentially between the two of them so that she could understand that the embodied version was not the version that went to the liberal arts school, but that she still held those values. And the way in which the session ended was actually the merging of those two identities, even though it had been differentiated as a part that she experienced. By the time we were finished, that part actually became part of her. So now they work together. She talks to that part. It's a part that she no longer feels is burdened in the same way because the choice to create her in that way was not available to her.
I don't remember last time when my mind was exploding. I think I'm having that experience because it's interesting that sometimes I do have those parts coming forward that are kind of, what if I would make that move and all the trajectory of life would go that direction, and there is a
Yes.
little bit of grieving around some stuff.
Yes, that's
And
exactly right.
this is so validating, just seeing that and reading that. And when we talk about what is actually therapy, these
Yeah.
kind of concepts, they open the doors to something that I don't see now. Maybe through psychedelics people experiencing this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
in a sober way, maybe not yet fully. There is enough therapists that can hold space for this
Well,
presentations.
I love that you actually raised that because I'm not a therapist.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think that that's really important, right? I'm a minister who was trained at IFSI. I'm a level 3 certified practitioner. And I will say that my work is at the intersection of psychology and spirituality, right? That is where my work kind of comes together. And it is work that I think benefits the therapist to be open to. We don't go chasing after these things. And that's something that I think is really important. Just because someone says, oh, I wish that I had married my first love, doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to encounter a part like this. But if that person is constantly toggling between the life they're in and the life that they would have been in if they had made this other choice, it's keeping them from the present moment. And I'm so glad that you named the word grief, because I don't know if you know this or not, but Jory Agate and I are actually leading a grief retreat with Life Architect in Portugal in the fall. And she would say that all IFS is grief work. And I would say that all IFS is both grief work and identity work. We are constantly imagining and reimagining our identity. And so this is a beautiful example, this alternate reality part, where psychology, spirituality, identity, and grief work all kind of come together at the same time. And so whether or not you are a spiritual guide or whether or not you are a therapist, the work is kind of crossing over on top of itself in a moment like that. And there's an opportunity for us to be able to validate the client. If the client says, I just can't stop thinking about what my life would have been like if I had, and then fills in the blank, right? And so we went from that to being with that client's system. And I always start embodied. So when you think about having made that other choice, where do you notice it in your body? And that basically led itself to be this part that was talking back to her. It was differentiated enough for her to be in relationship with it. And I was able to normalize it enough that she could be in relationship with that part fully. And that part could hear her, right? The difference, of course, between IFS and all other therapeutic modalities is that, it is an embodied relationship encounter. It is an encounter with our system. And that's important because turning toward a part is not the same thing as understanding or thinking about a part, as we all know in IFS. And so giving someone an opportunity to encounter and to be with a part of themselves that embodies a choice they did not make can transform someone's understanding of themselves and their lives.
Absolutely. I would call that encounter is a kind of moments of enlightenment on some level,
Yeah, yeah,
right? As we sometimes we're trying to find an answer on the outside and we read books and try to absorb all the right information and try
Right,
to kind
right.
of follow the book. But sometimes beautifully, most of the time happening during IFS work, we help people to turn inside
Yeah,
and
yeah.
encounter and build that relationship with, it's a common say to say, build relationship with yourself. But in IFS, that's a very broad term, because you can
Yeah.
also encounter these aspects of you that from completely different perspectives, realities, time frames. And I'm really glad that internal family systems actually offering us this framework of
It has
self-encounter.
yes, it has radically changed my life. I mean, I had tried so many different kinds of therapeutic modalities, and the only thing that helped me were psychedelics and IFS. And it took me a long time to get to IFS. I wish I had found it so much sooner, because I knew that there was a way to be able to do the kind of work that I wanted to do around attention and connection and living out my values in the world and my own spiritual understanding without having to take a drug, without having to ingest something in order to be able to get there. And IFS is really what has helped make that happen. I want to circle back, if we can, for just a minute before we go on to another transpersonal part, though. You use the word fractal, and I think that that is so important to understand for lots of reasons. Um, you said that we read all these books, and we move through trying to understand how to approach things differently, and it's not about that, it's about the relationship. And I just want to argue that with the Inner Sanctuary Institute, which is the institute that I started, where we're training people who in spiritual formation, it's basically IFS and how to lead folks in IFS, but it's also spiritual formation. And so it's in a very specific context and with a little bit of a different flavor around self being the seat of consciousness, and a place where we have an encounter with the eternal as well as with our material world. But fractals are an important part of that. And the curriculum, in essence, as we see the curriculum at the Inner Sanctuary Institute, is our life. Our life is the curriculum. Our life is the sacred scripture. And so paying attention to the fractals of what happens on the inside of us also happens on the outside of us. So there's an inner sanctuary inside me. There's an inner sanctuary inside you. There's a sanctuary that emerges between us in the moment. Communities have inner sanctuaries, institutions have inner sanctuaries, humanity may even have an inner sanctuary. But the idea is basically that that is a place where the relationship between us and another, between me and the other, can happen. And when we start to pay attention to those moments, and our posture is not only attentive, we're paying attention to where we're paying attention, right? It's like that meta posture of where is my attention going? It creates a whole different conversation around what is holy, what is happening between us. I see guiding in IFS as a spiritual practice, because it forces me to be in my seat of consciousness, to allow whatever is emerging to emerge, and creates this third thing between me and the client, right? So there's this unfolding awakening of what's happening between us. So actually, it creates a really interesting conversation that I've started with Dick Schwartz about countertransference and the way that countertransference is seen in psychology. So when we have these moments, for those of folks who are not therapists, when we have these moments where we recognize something inside our sessions with a client that is also happening inside our life or our world, how do we treat that? What happens in those moments? And I think when we have a posture of serendipity, a posture of synchronicity, when we're paying attention to the ways in which even small things. I've had so many conversations with guides where something that is really prominent in our life shows up in a session that could, I mean, it's not, I'm working on my relationship with my mother. It's more like a red bunny, like something so bizarre that it feels like it couldn't have been scripted. And it's, for me, a feedback loop from the largest present system, or a feedback loop from God that says, pay attention. It's like an underscore. It's like, pay attention to what's happening in this moment, because whatever is happening in this moment is sacred and holy and needs to be paid attention to.
Again, another mind-blowing moment for me. So many validating things that you said, because my experience of working with people feels like I'm doing therapy with myself.
Yes.
And the
Yes.
parts the clients present and stuff they present and patterns and traumas, and
Yes.
it feels like I'm just sitting with my system day after
Yes.
day, and I just cannot name it. I cannot find a right word
Thank you.
what to say about that.
They're a part of you. They're a part of you. And in my position and my sacredness of approaching this work is that whoever is drawn to do their work with me. Now, I don't have clients that are assigned to me. I know some therapists do and some practitioners do, but the clients who are drawn to me are drawn to me for a reason. And when I can trust that I'm in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing for the right reasons, and that I have the skills and the capacity to be able to pay attention and not only learn something about myself in this moment, but support from my seat of myself, support the relationship between me, myself, and my parts, and my self energy and the client self energy and their parts. It is this fractal, right? It's this, I like to use the image of nesting dolls that you see in
Russian
around the
dolls. Yeah, yeah,
holidays.
yeah.
Yeah, Russian dolls. Yeah. With the idea of when I greet the person in front of me as a part of myself and I do that U-turn, right, around the things that bother me in this client or the things that bother me in this person that's in front of me is related to something that's going on inside of me and my story, right? When I track that and do the U-turn and follow the trailhead and recognize that the people who are in front of me are offering me a gift by allowing me to be with them and going into their systems. And so as I'm helping support them, it's reciprocal. They are offering something back to me that I can take away from this experience, and their lives and their stories are now a part of me. Because no IFS work, in my opinion, is surface level. Like we're getting to the crux of what it means to be human and to be alive, to hold that soul inside this material body. And so when we're allowed to be with someone in that deep of a space, it's holy. It's a holy co-creative moment that if I don't pay attention to how it impacts my own story, my own life, I'm missing half the story. Yeah.
I think for those people that are listening and that are holding space for other people, this might be an important message, a very, very important message to track and probably approach systems that we sit with as some sort of interesting mirror into
Yes.
our own world. And at the end of the day, like you call that sanctuary, right? Like an inner
Yeah.
sanctuary. Maybe
Yeah.
when all of us go inside, right, we all enter some sort of shared sanctuary, shared space
Yes.
where
Yes. Agreed. Yes.
everything is very connected. And this is you, your body, this is me, my body, but on the inside, in the inner world or inner sanctuary, maybe things are not that different. And
I
it's
love
a
that.
different level of reality, level of existence.
Well,
Huh.
we are two parts of a similar whole, right? So we are parts of a larger present system of whatever, whether you want to call that group a group of practitioners or just a group of humans or a group of Americans or a group of, globally conscious spiritual people, whatever that is. Yeah, we're part of a larger whole. And I love that you use the word mirror. I have these t-shirts that I actually made, and folks that work with me asked me to make them available to people. So you can actually get them on my website. But I have these t-shirts that are in the shape of a mirror, like a mirror. And it says, you remind me of my, and then there's either self in capital letters or you remind me of my part. With the
Yeah,
idea that if we move through the world in that way, it changes how we encounter relationship.
it's a
Yeah.
big, big shift in perspective. It's
Yes.
how we just approach, this reality and interconnectedness. And um, I will move to the next part.
Sure.
We still have some material.
Yeah.
So we have the multiverse part, a
Yeah.
version of the client in a timeline unrelated to known choices. I am you, but I was born in Russia and you don't remember me.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And once again, that happened that happened in a session, right? So the way that this showed up actually was a client of mine who said, this is fascinating. He said when he was a child, he would go into a kitchen in a house that he lived in as a 7, 8 year old and would see this old man sitting at a table with a hat. And he used to be kind of scared of this experience that he had, but he related it to this part that we met in session one day, who said in the moment of the session that he was him, but he was not born in the same place where this client was born. And he was much older. So he's actually on a different timeline, but he was convinced that he was him. So he's like, I am you. I was born in Louisiana. I was not born where you were born. And what do you do with that? Right?
Well, yeah, yeah. I think with all this material, you just need to sit with it, like just sit with it. But what's coming to me is like sometimes, I don't know, everyone perceive, experience, and understand the word soul in different ways, but it
Mhm.
just feels like our consciousness, right? Sometimes it
Yep.
can split itself in two, or maybe in three, or
Yes.
maybe in four. Maybe there is a
Yes.
multiverse of ourselves in different dimensions, realities, locations, and places, and we're just too
Yes.
busy with our day-to-day mundane stuff to sometimes have a moment of feeling like, oh, I feel like there is a part of me. Oh, actually, thinking about that, I always speak on my sessions, my own IFS therapy. I always speak about the part of me that lives on a blue planet. I
Yeah.
talk about that all the time. She's there and it's much better. And yeah, and I wish I was there and blah, blah,
Yes.
blah. And sometimes I go to her and I have to come back, but she's there. She's in other kind of reality. And, sometimes I don't really take that very seriously, but I should take it much
Yeah,
more seriously.
that's interesting. I love Mark Wallen's book on epigenetics, that it didn't start with me, but he talks very specifically about a life sentence, right? A sentence that we say that we don't know where it came from, but we say it all the time. So that would be one of those. I would see that as one of those. And like, can we actually be with that phrase that we hear ourselves saying over and over again, that maybe we didn't see it in a television show, we didn't experience it that way. It's just something that for some reason our bodies, our systems repeat. And I think it's very important to pay attention to those things and how they're impacting how you view the world. And I do a lot of DEI work. I have done a lot of restorative justice work and anti-racism work, and being able to tune our system. I see our bodies as an antenna, and the culture that we are raised in is constantly transmitting its values and its ideas and its material experience of the world to us. And we have to be able to recognize that whatever the culture is beaming to us will come out of our mouths unless we are paying attention and know that we can change the channel. Like when we start to question and analyze, oh, is this my value or is this the culture's value? And we begin to start to have more and more choices the more that we are aware of that. And I think that your example is kind of one of those. It's like nobody's walking around the world who, and speaking out loud that they that they think that they have parts of themselves on another planet. But I love this idea of being able to authentically engage with that. And that fractally is a deep argument in IFS about whether or not exiles actually have taken a part of our self energy into exile with them as they have been exiled. And I would argue, and Margaret Conley probably would agree with me, that that is true, that when you unburden an exile, you have more access to that exile self energy. Well, whose energy is it? I mean, if energy can't be created or destroyed, then it's almost like it was just segmented. So if that's true in our Russian doll fractal analogy, like we're talking about Vlada, then it's probably also true externally as much as it is true internally. So there's probably a part of my self energy potentially that is somewhere else. But I see that as God in some ways in the largest present system. It's like in order for the singularity that was the energy that created the world, in order to be able that singularity to have relationship, it had to divide itself in order to create that relationship. And so spiritually, that's where I go too, that if we all come from a similar energetic source, then a part of me that is the energy of the original source is also in you, which is that self energy divided in some way, the same way that it is with IFS.
Yes. And I studied Eastern philosophy and yoga
Mhm.
philosophy for almost a decade. And I really love how they show it that because the God is just one, it's just one energy or one being or one consciousness. It's just one thing. And at some point, it got really bored to be just alone. And so it kind of split itself into this
Right?
myriad of little kind of drops of itself, which we may say our consciousness or our souls, but at the end of the day, we are made of the same stuff. And
Yes.
this is how the supreme being is interacting with itself through itself.
Yes. 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 And that relates to time as well. It's not, we are the universe looking back at itself in some ways. We are the universe reflecting back on itself. We are stardust. And my daughter, who is now 16, but when she was 5 years old, told this beautiful story. We were driving around in a convertible at night. I was taking her home and we were looking up at the sky in Oklahoma where there were no street lights. And so it's just pitch black and there's stars everywhere. And I was talking to her about the stars and we're looking up at the stars. And I said, sweetheart, even the places where it looks dark to us right now, there's still stars there. There's still light in the places where there's darkness. And she, in her infinite wisdom, turned to me and said, I said, we're made of stars. And she said, and love glue. And I
Oh,
said, right, and love glue. Yeah. So that is it, right? Like if everything we're talking about can be wrapped up into one thing, it's that, right? How do we have a position of love where we can appreciate, we can sit in our seat of self and appreciate whatever is in front of us and know that protectors exist, right? And so, and that they're not all of whoever a person is who's presenting in front of us, and know that behind whatever experience they had that created the parts that we might be experiencing in the moment, that behind that is a self energy that's connected to us, a self energy that is love, a self energy that is desperately wanting to be seen, so that they are not only seen for the protector that is presenting itself in the moment, and exiles that are desperately trying to break free, right? That are trying to break free from the places where they are, so that whatever person is in front of us can be their fully expressive, generative self with access to all of their self energy from every age they've ever been, from every year they've ever experienced, right? So that we can have access to those younger parts of ourselves to relate to the world. It gives us more playfulness. It gives us more access to energy that we're encountering in the world so that we can connect. And I think that that essentially is our role, is to be able to connect from that place of our individual differentiated experience of self energy and of the holy.
yeah. And I think the most important is in this day-to-day life. When I was just sharing with my husband, I said, I feel like every day I have to fight with someone, with the landlord of the new apartment, or this person is in this. And it's, you just forget in the middle of, everyday protectors going on top of other protectors, you just forget that at the end, the glue of love is connecting
Yeah.
us all. But,
Well, and I would argue too, Vlada, my Christian mystical tradition would say that that's about being in the world and not of it, right? The world is made up of so many protectors and so much of the delusion of our separateness that we have to really place our attention religiously. I would use that word loosely, but we have to practice, right? Living from that place if we want to do that in the world.
and
Yeah.
that's where the t-shirts are coming in with a
Exactly.
mirror.
Exactly.
Remember,
Exactly.
look.
Exactly.
So that's a good t-shirt for sure. As I'm speaking to you, what is just coming to me, that there are spiritual traditions that in different styles, in different shapes and forms, with different names, trying to explain that to us. There is
Yeah,
also psychedelic experiences, which
sure.
I really never had psychedelic experience, but I feel like I'm already on psychedelics
You're
with
living
IFS.
it. Yeah. Yes.
Um, So people try psychedelics to have a little bit of that moment of like, whoa, wait, the tree is
Yes.
looking at me and you and me, and we are all.
Yes.
And interestingly, with IFS and IFS, that now, thank God, Dr. Richard Schwartz is also opening up the door to the
Yes.
spirituality.
Yeah.
Leaders in internal family systems starting to bring to the table this internal dimension and our parts, and like you are doing now, kind of connecting all of that to consciousness and self energy. This becomes an awakening experience without being attached to any spiritual tradition or being
Yeah.
under influence of substance, right? It just becomes
Yes.
a sober awakening
Yes. I
process.
love that. I love that you called it that. So I don't know, I haven't mentioned, I don't believe, but so Dick Schwartz just did a recent IFS and spirituality course with Tammy Simon and Sounds True. And my wife and I actually are part now of that program as a bonus video talking about IFS and Christianity from the position of kind of a universalist mystical Christian space. So we're obviously both queer because it's my wife, and she started a church, and I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister. And so there's a way in which we are using IFS as, I would argue, a cosmological map. And so we're using IFS as a way to deepen our understanding of our own faith tradition. And I think that that's the direction that Dick is trying to go in, which is basically saying that IFS can augment, support, help you deepen your faith tradition. It doesn't have to be something that is in opposition to your faith tradition. It actually can help us to be more in alignment with our faith tradition. So at House Church Tulsa here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in the middle of a very a very red state, we are offering IFS experiences through the lens of Inner Sanctuary Institute by creating once a month an opportunity for people to come to a circle where we explore a little bit of scripture. I teach a little bit about IFS. We do an internal guided reflection where people can connect with their own systems and their own parts. And then we have a break and then select someone for a demo who volunteers. And the demo happens in the church in a group in a way that is just one of the most beautiful reconnections of what I believe has been separated for so long and doesn't need to be. And that is spirituality and mental health. And so we create a space where a demo happens, and the people who are sitting on the outside of the circle are lending their systems and their self energy to what's happening inside the circle while one person is experiencing a session of IFS. And it is transformative to the entire community. It's changed and deepened the language of the community so that they're not over identifying with the harm that they've experienced or the harm that they've caused. So they know now that they're not the worst thing they've ever done, and not the worst thing that's ever happened to them. They are deepening their relationship and their connection to spirit. They're more aware about their own consent when they are saying yes and when they're saying no, who is actually speaking, because we're helping them to identify with their own self energy. And so as they heal their parts and unburden parts, they have more access to self energy to know when a part is speaking through them, which to me has just also really deepened our experience of worship. So on a Sunday morning, when we come together and gather, and you have people who are present who are more in their seat of self and their self awareness, it changes the way in which we experience worship at its highest level. And so I'm really excited about it. And it's something that Inner Sanctuary Institute is interested in bringing to other churches and training clergy and training spiritual leaders and pastoral care leaders to be able to do, so that they can offer something similar in their own churches and have a team of pastoral care providers who are also trained in internal family systems version of, we call it ISI, Inner Sanctuary Institute, so that they're trained to be able to lead people through this experience in their own kind of spiritual formation and pastoral care context.
That's very rich work. And I think it's a transitioning, right, from the kind of very old school dogmatic way of perceiving religion to really embodying it from the inside and allowing people
Yeah.
to experience spirituality not as a set of rules in a book, but actually as their
Right.
internal sacredness and experience, and for people witnessing that in another definitely reflects back to them their inner sanctuary as well. So it's
That's exactly right.
it just feels like it's like an embodied spirituality, which
Yes.
finally is coming forward. And I think that we need more of that embodied spirituality, not
Yeah,
egoic kind of spirituality, but
absolutely.
self-led spirituality.
Yes. Yes.
And one thing, as we were talking, it's so interesting when you mentioned that when we unburden and exile, there is more of self energy becomes available.
Yes.
And when you also mentioned the bridge between mental health and spirituality,
Yes.
I'm just curious because sometimes, people coming like there is depression or there is anxiety and they're going looking for counselor or therapist or practitioner to resolve this problem. And this anxiety not necessarily can be biographical, right?
Yeah.
Where we
Yeah.
started. It can
Yep.
be
Yep.
future life, past life. It
Yes.
can be multiverse of things that
Sure.
is very important to be aware of. And then also it is important to really work with it so that drop by drop, as I really like to say, like session after session, experience after experience, our system gets those burdens off and we do access more of our self energy. And I'm really curious, how do you see this self energy from the psychological perspective and from the spiritual perspective?
Yeah. For me, I think we're attending to the same thing. So for me, self energy is a position. It's a location. It's the homeland inside of us. It's what Judaism and Christianity might call the Holy of Holies. It's the place where we go in order to be in relationship from the material with the eternal. That's the spiritual definition. And I would argue that self energy is also something like consciousness that we live in, and we live inside of it. It lives inside us. And when we're talking about it from a psychological perspective, um, I think that the only shift that I would say is that we can only tell that someone is in self energy by these characteristics and qualities that they exude that Dick has researched, right? And there's a parallel between the 8 C's, and my organization has added some of those C's. Dick knows about kind of how I've done some of this work, but we add consent and choice to the C's because to me, the relationship that we're wanting to invite both in a psychological space and in a religious space, we are being invited to a conversation and we're not being forced. And so, how do we also honor consent and choice? When I feel like I'm in my self energy seat, I feel like I have a lot of choice. And I feel like I can offer my consent, right, in a way that is more self led, that is either turned inside to listen to all of the parts that may be on different teams about why I should or should not do things. And I can help to support them in leading them forward in a choice that comes out of my mouth, right? So, being self-led in a psychological space to me is about having relationship with our parts, taking the time to turn toward them. And in a religious space or a spirituality space, I would say we're turning toward the largest system. So it really is that fractal again. It's a place where either I'm turning toward the largest system or I'm turning towards the system that's inside of me. Psychology would call it the inner system turning toward us. Spirituality would call it turning toward the outside. I don't consider it outside, but turning towards the largest system that we're a part of.
So, if I got this right, in spirituality, for example, an act of prayer, right? It's an act of connecting our self with
Yes.
something bigger, like spiritual beingness, God, the divine. Some
Yeah, and
people
for those
call it the
people who don't
universe.
like that language, I would say to our largest purpose in the world, to the version of ourselves that is living out our values more regularly. It doesn't have to be God language. God language has been so corrupted in so many spaces. And I speak to people who would consider themselves humanist or transcendentalist or atheist, along with people who would consider themselves to be Buddhist or Christian. So there's ways in which I think that the language has been corrupted, but the idea is turning towards that largest system, the calling that we have on our lives, the purpose that we are carrying. And then what is that purpose? I think is something that we have to really deeply dig into. And from my perspective, it's the thing that calls us to use our unique story in the world. So to heal the parts of us and be that wounded healer in the world, right? So that we can use our experience, the things that keep us unique and differentiated from others in the world as a way to continue to bring healing in the world, whatever that might look like for you. And it's different for everyone, but it's staying connected to the whole and staying connected to our system inside at the same time.
So it's inner and outer.
Yes. So that's that Mobius strip I was talking about, right? So it's about constantly toggling, and attention is so much a part of this. And spirituality of a variety of ways, and actually religion too, and the culture are all trying to shape where we put our attention. And for me, I'm really digging into this idea of a theology of attention as a spiritual practice. Um, I think that the stewardship of our own attention is a really important component. And we live in an attention economy where our attention is being monetized in order to support other people's dreams and plans. I would argue that our imagination is being monetized in a similar way. And we're losing the capacity to be able to use our own imagination and our own brains to support ourselves because we've outsourced all of our healing to other people on the outside. And sometimes without our consent. I mean, it's the silent consent, right? It's the unattended to consent. And that actually is the biggest problem, in my opinion, is that we are not paying attention to our inner power. We're not paying attention to where our attention is being taken, right? So I think the big questions for me that are spiritual and psychological questions are, who has my attention now? And who is leading me now? And what am I consenting to? And what is asking for my attention? And that's why I said earlier that posture of serendipity is so important to me, because in my world and my life, and when I talk to people about their mystical experiences and the things that took them on the path that have been the most exciting in this human journey, it often involves some kind of unexplainable serendipitous awareness, synchronous awareness. This happened to me, and then this happened to me. And these two things, the pattern of my own recognition and my soul guided me in this particular direction. So I think positioning ourselves, our attention in a posture of looking for those patterns in our own lives as though our lives were scripture is the work in some ways. And that's what we're trying to teach at the Intersanctuary Institute. And we use IFS as the map in order to do that.
So much for saying that. I think in the common culture, the attention crisis is really alarming. And I just moved apartments, and I intentionally didn't buy TV. So it's been a couple of weeks, absolutely no TV, just books and music, nothing else. And you already sense how your attention starts going into more productive channels and directions. And the topic of attention is vital. It's huge, and it's so important that you're raising it, because if we don't use our attention intentionally, right, either we go inside and we understand our inner verse, or we contemplate our bigger mission in life, or purpose in life, or ourselves and the world and existence, then we're just, we're just going through motion basically without presence.
Right. And liberation, I'm interested in social justice and liberation, both of ourselves and of the exiles we've created in this world, I think begins when we recover our capacity to consciously direct our attention instead of unconsciously surrendering it to something on the outside world that, I meet with so many people who, they finally come to do this work, whatever that means for them, whether or not they're in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, their 50s. And IFS offers them this opportunity for them to understand more about what was saying yes to different parts of their life, like who took them down the road of deciding to be what they were in their profession. And they're so uncomfortable with, I mean, it's every Disney story, right? It's like, their parents were bakers and so they're going to be a baker, or are they not going to be a baker? They're going to break away and not be the baker. It's like, right, who's saying yes? How do they both honor who they are and the culture, the tradition that they came in? How do they know who is saying yes and who is saying no on the outside? When do we give away our power for our own healing to these, articulate whatever it is, the industrial complexes of the world,
What
instead of paying attention?
I'm just really curious, as you talking about that, I'm sure that you've developed some sort of hacks into making sure your attention is going into the ways that you choose consciously and intentionally. What is your to-go suggestion? How can we start harnessing control over our attention?
I love that you asked that question. And I cannot say, I humbly give you an answer that I cannot say I do 100% of the time, right? So I really do believe that I am a follower of Jesus, and I believe that when he says, remember me, that's exactly what he's talking about. We forget all
Mm.
the time. We forget all the time. And actually, I love that model of communion, of coming back to a table and recognizing that when we eat and drink, we're supposed to remember something larger. Well, I would say that's actually about all of our senses. It's not just about eating and drinking in a communion style way. It's, are we paying attention to what has our attention? So that's that meta phrase I was saying earlier. And it takes just a discipline of spending time with ourselves, integrating how we've spent the day before, how we plan to spend the day ahead. So my practice looks like, it's related to my calendar, which is fascinating. This kind of grabs us back around to time. I journal, and I think journaling is an important part of my own practice so that I can allow my parts to speak on the page. You were talking about prayer, and I think that prayer is about aligning with our largest system, but it's also about sometimes speaking for our parts. Like, how long, oh Lord, is this going to keep going on in my life, right? Like wailing as well, and grieving is an important part of that. And that happens on the page in my journal as much as it happens in prayer. So I think that giving space to voice those things is important, but also like taking time to integrate and pay attention to how your time and your attention is being used. And is that how you want your time and your attention to be used? I also sit with my calendar in the morning with all the people that I'm going to see in that day. And I would call it prayer, but I'm turning inward and checking with my system about, okay, who's on my schedule today? And I'll do this in a couple of different ways. I do it on Sundays for the whole week and look at how I've organized my week, because sometimes my managers can get control of me and fill in every single hour on my calendar with no time for pause and integration. And so I will look on Sunday at my week and think, okay, what am I feeling drawn towards this week? Is there enough space for me in this week? And if not, what can I shift? Is there a space to shift? And in my world, when I come at that with humility and can honor the manager who put it on my calendar in the first place, who can honor the person who I'm supposed to meet, I sometimes will reach out to a client or to whatever I'm responding to in that moment and say, I'm wondering, if I'm seeing that my calendar is really full this day and I really want to give you my full attention, I'm wondering if, and give them the next available date, would work better for you. And if not, I'll make it happen, because it's a relationship, right? And 9 times out of 10, they say, oh my gosh, that would be so amazing. I didn't want to cancel on you. And yeah, so 9 times out of 10, I'm picking up something in the field that, like, this maybe isn't the right time for us to connect. I have a saying, and that is, wisdom is knowing what time it is. Wisdom is knowing what time it is. And so when we are paying attention to our system and what parts are resisting a certain encounter, they carry wisdom with them. And that doesn't mean we don't do anything, right? If we have a part of us that's constantly resisting the same thing, then we need to analyze that a little bit further. But when you can pay attention from that stance of, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and I believe the other person has self energy, and I want us to meet in a space that is going to be generative for both of us. I do that on Sundays, but I do it every morning too, and ask my parts to tell me, what do I need to know about any resistance that I might be feeling about meeting with this client today. And it gives me space to be able to approach my day with more deliberateness, with more openness. And then at the end of the day, I reflect back on what the day's been like. And if any parts are up around, I call it a circle because I'm a restorative justice practitioner. So I kind of gather them around the fire at the end of the day. And this is it's a 10-minute process as I'm trying to fall asleep. This is not anything formal, but I'm gathering them around a fire at the end of the day and saying, who's still holding stuff from how we handled today? What do I need to know? How can I be a better leader for you? If we don't have proximity, if we don't have relationship to our inner system, we cannot lead them well. And I believe that's true in the world too. The further we get away from the source of power, the more difficult it is for people to be able to lead us well with our intentions and our needs in mind.
What you're saying is kind of being self-led. Is at the end of the day, when we are in self-leadership, we own our attention, we are aware of time, we are present, we are consulting with our system. And then something happens in the larger system where we start kind of integrating our calendar with calendar of another person. Sometimes I just need to think, I really can't do this today, and I will get in 5 minutes a cancellation.
Me too. Me too. And my wife and I actually joke about this because sometimes when our energy comes together and we're like, oh, we just need an afternoon, literally, it sounds so crazy, but like, I'll get a cancellation, she'll get a cancellation. I'll get a cancellation, she'll get a cancellation. I'm like, well, we've got 2 hours now. I want to go do something.
This is when there is, you're kind of in tune, right? Like your calendar starts time aligning with other people's time, and
with the field, right? It's a field that we are part of and that we are connected to. And when we start to recognize that we are part of that larger field, we're attuned to the larger field in addition to being attuned to ourselves. I think that alignment, and that's why I was saying serendipity kind of becomes the poker tell, so to speak, of the fact that that's happening. Those serendipitous moments not only are a dopamine hit in my system, but they're showing me in some ways that I'm on the right track, that I'm headed in I'm connected to the whole at the same time that I'm connected to myself.
Beautiful. Celeste, thank you very, very much for so many things today. It was a really, really rich time together with you, and also for the things that you prepared and sent to me and gave me permission to share with others. I wanted to ask your permission to share this with a group that I have with other IFS practitioners. Thank you for doing that. And we just really look forward to continue seeing how your work and offerings will be developing. And you mentioned the retreat that you will be hosting in Portugal. What else are you planning for the year or for the future?
Yeah, I really appreciate you asking. So on Friday of this week, I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but at the end of Friday, I'm going to be repeating the transpersonal parts workshop that I did at IFSI Global Conference. And it's a pay what you can. You can find that on my website at celestelebak.com. And then I have 2 upcoming cohorts, one on self-energy. So we actually gather in a group every other week and explore the qualities of self-energy together in a group in an IFS-informed kind of restorative justice listening circle. I've had people level 3 trained, new to IFS, folks who are lead trainers actually in IFSI participate in this group. So it really is for all levels. It's just using IFS language to both go inside and explore the qualities, what gets in the way of us accessing those qualities, what do those qualities feel like in our body, and then sharing openly in this structured way what that self-energy quality is like for us in a reflection, and the way in which we hear from other people and how they experience those qualities actually influences and impacts how we experience those qualities as well. And it's just a very rich, beautiful conversation. And then I have another cohort that's coming up around it's around cultural burdens, but they're very specific in some ways because what I'm treating as cultural burdens are dominant culture characteristics. So looking at perfectionism and sense of urgency and either or thinking, these things that often bind us in the culture to feel limited in our choices. And so we're gathering once a month, actually, over the course of the year to engage in a similar kind of process where we go inside, do our own individual work, and then we actually have a very structured way of sharing that allows for deep listening around those cultural burdens as well. So those are two ways, very affordable ways to be able to connect with the work that I'm doing. And then the Intersanctuary Institute we're one session away from completing our first clinical pastoral education unit, which is a training that many clergy have to have in order to be able to be chaplains or in order to be credentialed in their denominations. And another unit of that will be starting in the fall. And then the very first Intersanctuary Institute clergy training is happening in the fall as well. So if you know ministers who you think would benefit from being trained in this kind of IFS map in the Intersanctuary way, I would love for you to send them to my website so that they can access not either the CPE units or this level 1 training that we're going to be starting in the fall. And Jory Agate and Margaret Connolly are going to be supporting me in that. So they'll be trained by clergy. They'll be trained by 2 female clergy, 3 if you include me, 2 lead trainers and myself, which is a beautiful opportunity because IFSI has really narrowed their scope on who they want to be training right now. And so it's an opportunity to be able to engage with IFS in a different way.
Thank you for sharing that. And it sounds like you're going to have a lot on your plate. Exciting, but also hopefully you make sure that you get enough space to contemplate and be with your system and with your family. And
Thank you,
for
Vlada.
everyone, really interested to take it further in terms of spirituality, self-development, internal family systems, and all the things, please go to Celeste's website, and she has everything lined up there very well. And all the links will be here in the show notes.
Vlada, thank you for what we've co-created today and for your self-led presence and for the way in which this conversation has been so generative and such a gift to me to be able to be in relationship with you around this work. So thank you again for that.
Thank you so much for accepting the invitation. It's a huge gift, and I hope it will be a huge gift for everyone who listened to it.
Thank you. Me too.
Thank you for staying with me until the end. If you feel called to deepen this journey, you'll find everything you need in the show notes, including a link to a book complimentary call with me and more details about my work and today's guest. May you continue walk your path with clarity, courage, and self-led grace. Until soon.